last week we discussed the police welfare when we talked about rogue police officers. Dr. Mumanza, I see you nodding vigorously. So I'll start with you. So the theme, this year's KDF Day, the 8th, was themed around the welfare of the defense, our soldiers.
That's right.
What in your assessment, what is the state of affairs as far as that is concerned?
You know, a country's security and national defense architecture reflects about the people and the human security in many ways. And therefore, the centrality of the soldier, the serviceman and servicewoman, we used to say officers and men. These days we say officers and servicemen and women. And at the center of it is the welfare of the soldier. We have been celebrating alongside not just KDF Day. Last time it was in Gilgil. This time we had it at Langata Barracks. But in every other installation, there were celebrations celebrating the soldier. But now we've had Army at 55. Kenya Army at 55 is produced a publication, you know, the soldier's legacy, and is at the center of the welfare of the very junior officer, the very junior, you know, the soldier who has paid the ultimate price for purposes of defending our national integrity, our sovereignty, and our pride as our people, to protect our freedom. And everybody is in agreement, not just here, but world over, that Kenya has paid the ultimate price. And therefore, KDF is, you know, an embodiment of that spirit of our nationalism in many ways. I was looking through the statistics. They have planted, just in the last 5 years, over 5 million trees. Civil-military relations, going close where there are disasters, humanitarian work, and so on. Over and above that, of course, engagements in international missions, regionally and internationally. And of course, the biggest being the context of because the broad mandate AMISOM has in Somalia. And Kenya has played her part, together with Ethiopia and other countries, in ensuring that the place is stabilized. And so they have paid the price out there so that we can have the calm, the peace we've had. You remember 2011, 2009, that period and so on, we used to have people coming with grenades here in town. And that has stopped. And that freedom, we don't take it for granted. The other one, of course, is the welfare for families of people who have lost their lives in duty or gotten into harm's way in the line of duty. We now have about 3 or 4 family care centers inside the military installations at the Moya base, in Isiolo and other places where those families are being engaged. There is still a problem, and this one is sensitive, because we have personnel that are MIA, which are missing in action, who are still being, you know, they're out there, and it is on live issues like postal ad and such things. And so without getting too much into the operational art around those issues, the families of those people are being encouraged, being cancelled, and so on. And therefore, that is the kind of outlook we have. Also. And we hopefully are going to have you know, a beautiful launch of the soldier's legacy.
Okay. Yeah. You raised Alade and post Alade, basically servicemen who are missing in action.
Yes.
Psychological support was a big issue.
It's been there.
On the KDF Day. They celebrated, I think, at least 2 servicemen who provided that psychological support.
That's right.
For those who've been serving in Somalia.
That's right.
Does that have any meaning? Let me go back to Dr. Mustafa. Why that focus? Because I saw there was quite a bit of focus on that psychological support for the families who are bereaved, and also for the servicemen who are serving in Somalia.
Yeah, Olive, first of all, is to congratulate the men and women in uniform who serve this country gallantly. In Somalia and many other parts of the world, and they've raised Kenya's flag. If Kenya is going to be given that slot as a non-permanent member of the Security Council, it is really because of the men and women in uniform serving in various peace missions and UN campaigns around the world to bring about peace or to enforce peace in countries like Somalia, in Sudan, Sierra Leone, and many other places. Now, they focus on the psychological issues, and this is something that all militaries around the world, professional militaries, have got to focus on because of the challenges that soldiers normally do face in the line of duty. If you look at the United States of America, the most powerful army, the veterans go back after serving in various places, war zones around the world. Yeah, there is a whole ministry actually that takes care of that, and the Veterans Association. There are hospitals that are built specifically for the men and women in uniform that have served and have come back. There's always this whole issue of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, that affects people who have seen violence, have faced life and death situations. And to address that, you need to have a robust service that focuses on counseling, psychosocial support. In the US, up to 9 soldiers commit suicide every day because of and these are serving soldiers, because of what they have encountered in the battlefield. Now, for the veterans who retire later in life, the statistics are even much higher, and up to 9,000 soldiers commit suicide every year from the United States Army. This tells you, and yet they have the best of the services in terms of the psychosocial counseling, psychological support. So we ought to do the same, and I believe the KDF is actually working towards that. It's really the first time that Kenya is deploying in an active combat zone with significant challenges in the battlefield. And I know Rachel Omamo, the CS for Defense, last year did talk about this in Nanyuki when she visited, when they were celebrating the 54 years of KDF. And it's just to salute the men and women in uniform who happen to be our brothers, our sisters, fathers, mothers, uncles, serving and giving their lives for us to sleep in peace.
Right. Professor Midamba, then I'll come to you, Hashi. Why is this recognition that psychological support is needed so important? I know we spoke, I think it was Mental Health Day, was it last? There was a Mental Health Day last week? Yeah.
And I sent you all the tape, which I sent to all my students. Only when American soldiers came from Vietnam, they came to a really rude awakening of citizens, and some that was spitting on their face as they were coming into America. Those soldiers from Vietnam era war continue with very serious psychological trauma on their head, and a lot of them committed suicide in the United States because the way they were welcomed, and also the psychological nightmare they went through, fighting a war that had no purpose, literally no purpose, no exit strategy. That was very clear. So what we are talking about here, Ole, in the case of our KDF, our KDF went to Kismayo and displayed a professional scene that has not been attempted in Africa. That is air, sea, landing at the same time with very little collateral damage. That was quite remarkable. And we took over Kismayo, and we're managing it up to now. Now, some of those young men and women are coming back in body bags. They're past, they were killed. Some are coming with limbs, cut and everything. Some of these are very young people who's never been in this kind of situation before. And so I would really suggest that we consider a number of things. One is our KDF, and I have a lot of friends in there that are watching right now. Our KDF is the one protecting us from an external aggression. They're protecting me and you and everybody else. They're protecting our businesses and our homes. And they're protecting territorial integrity of the country. Now, when you put all that into question, then we need to be out on the parade. We need to be out parading and demonstrating to these people how we care about them. And therefore, I suggest that the celebration of KDF Day should not be at the army barrack. It needs to be at the Uhuru Park. Every Kenyan needs to be on the street. We need to take time off. We need to acknowledge these people. Secondly, we need to create welfare, which include mental health program. And I'm very glad to say that retired Major Lucy Mukoria, that is sometime a part of our panel here, are all concentrating in creating this mental health and making it a reality. It needs to pass through Parliament, and it needs to be a commitment of Kenyans in order to take care of their own. America does. For every American fighters, they go to Okinawa, Japan, and they're confined for a while, where they go through psychological training before they're let back into the mainland America. It is that important. So we are doing the right thing. We have a long way to go, and we all need to come together and put resources where resources need to belong.
Okay. Yes, Hashi?
Yes, the Kenya Defense Forces has been very loyal to the government of Kenya. Over the history of Africa, you've known that, that the army has always overthrown the government. In Kenya, you remember in 1982, I was quite young then, of course, the army tried to overthrow, the Air Force tried to overthrow the government. And the great General Mahmoud Mohammed put down that coup, showed the loyalty of the army to the government of Kenya. And it saved us from a lot of chaos. You know, the other day, 10 GSU officers lost their lives in Harhar near Garissa because they went through an IED and it exploded, and 10 brave, 11? 11 of them died. And my heart, you know, goes out to the families of these young people who lost their lives on the line of duty. You know, it's the ultimate sacrifice, and there's nothing more we can say about this. But Dr. Mumo and Dr. Midamba here have raised a very, very critical issue. It is very important that our country celebrate the sacrifices of these young men and women. And we need to talk about it, and it needs to come out into the open. We need to know the heroes and the heroines and their life stories and what they did for this country. If we secretly bury them in Elgeyo Marakwet or in Wajir or in Homa Bay or in Kitui, we're not celebrating our men and women. Well, we need to celebrate them in a very national way and then mourn with their families. And this gives closure. Those families know that these men and women gave their lives for something and that the country knows about them. Anonymity is not the way to go. We need to, as my colleagues here have said, celebrate these men and women. And in that way, the government also has to invest, as they've said, in their welfare. It's really important because if they don't invest in their welfare, and if they don't get their kids to go through university, if they don't pay their school fees, if they don't get lower interest rates to buy a housing, I mean, we will be spitting on the graves of those people who have defend this country every day.
Okay, and And speaking of investment, I see the Daily Nation reported that compensation claims are now being handled by 69 newly opened welfare centers spread across various military formations, units and bases around the country. Now, Dr. Kanenje, we've had the panelists saying we need to celebrate our servicemen, the other panelists. But for a long time, the KDF suffered from a bad rep, especially as far as our presence in Somalia is concerned. The accusations that they're trading in charcoal, sugar, and also apart from that, what was it? Yeah, even when they, when they handled the Westgate situation, they were accused of looting water, was it? For a long time, there seemed to be that public perception that, I don't know whether they perceived the KDF as hardened criminals or what it was, just that it was not very positive. Do you see that as having changed, and what could that be attributable to?
Yeah, I think despite some of the misgivings that we saw at Westgate, I would not say KDF is a bunch of hardened criminals. I think that is the term most appropriate for Kenyan politicians. Yeah,
I agree.
Yes, KDF actually historically has had a fairly decent reputation, and maybe part of it because it does not interact with people, but the world over is one of the most professional force we've actually had. And most of the world understand KDF to be as such. Now, that does not mean sometimes there are no bad apples, they're always there. Now, with regard to trading in charcoal and stuff like that, some people have actually claimed the reason Kenya is in Kismayo is because we went to sell charcoal, for heaven's sake. How much money are we spending in Somalia in a day or in our forces? And how much charcoal is there in the whole of Somalia, let alone Kismayo? That is balderdash. Okay. The truth is, while you have some criminal elements going on in a place such as Kismayo, that is not the reason the KDF now part of AMISOM, because there's really no KDF anymore in Somalia. It's AMISOM forces. So Kenya cannot even decide unilaterally to get out of Somalia either. Now, with regard to the welfare of KDF, this is what I would like to say. KDF is the only group of uniformed people, or at least the men and women in uniform, they're the only ones in this country, group of Kenyan society, that is always ready and willing to pay the ultimate sacrifice. None of us is always that prepared to do that. And when we send our men and women in harm's way in theaters of war, we have a solemn obligation to provide them with equipment to win the war, to tend to their families while they're away, and to take care of them when they come back. And there is no excuse for that. America does that. The rest of the world does that. And we should do that too.
All right. Dr. Mumunzao, and then I'll let you have the last word on this.
Wonderful. Very important is that KDF led the way with what now we are calling multi-agency operations, multifaceted operations, where they rope in other actors within the broader national security machinery, including the National Police Service and specialized units in there, including especially the GSU, the border unit, and other specialized units in there. And therefore, we are now in the age of what we call joint warfare and joint tactical operations. And that outlook, the KDF has been very active in weaning it out so that it is mainstreamed and gendered throughout. And therefore, one other thing I wanted to mention is that as we celebrate our sportswomen and men and women, many of them actually from our disciplined forces and other institutions, both in the private sector and general public realm, should follow suit and have, as part of their corporate social responsibility, we need nation media runners, team, and everything, and all the other medias and everyone, so that we can provide room for youths to have, because they're out there, there's talent. And people have to tap it, because this will take everyone on board, and this will be part of the Kenyan diplomacy we're talking about, track 2.
All
Very
right.
important.
Okay, but I want to stay on Somalia. Now, I want to read out a headline that was carried by the Daily Nation, and it reads, and this was on Sunday, Duale urges President Farmajo to make peace with Jubaland. And I'll just read out the first two paragraphs. National Assembly Majority Leader Aden Duale has asked Somalia President Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo to forge a unity of purpose and put the interest of Somali people above personal interests. Duale further challenged the leader to begin a path of reconciliation and partnership between the federal government and Jubaland administration, saying that this was the only way to guarantee peace in the region. And speaking on Saturday in Kismayo, where he led a delegation of MPs to the inauguration of President Ahmed Mohamed Madobe of the Jubaland state of Somalia for his second term in office. He said Kenya's interest in Jubaland is underpinned by our national security and that of the East Africa region. Mr. Duale said even as he challenged Jubaland to explore close ties with the federal government and other federal states. Now, this is where I'd like us to start when he says that Farmajo needs to put the interest of the Somali people above his personal interests.
I want to say something about this.
Yes.
It's my turn, obviously.
Yes.
Mr. Duale went to, I think it was Kericho, was it Bomet? And, used language that our erudite and sophisticated professor here would never use. And of course, because Mr. Duale is not as sophisticated and as erudite as my professor here on the right, he called the people, they called the governor there, kwani hii ni ya mama yako. So he said the same thing in Kismayo the other day, in Somali, in the equivalent in Somali. And the people there are shocked at the, in my culture, in my language, we speak in idioms, and we use poetry and sayings to express our feelings. So he used a completely inappropriate term in the language, and it really shocked everybody there. So I don't think that Mr. Duale is part of the diplomatic corps. He's a rabble-rouser MP from Garissa town, and his place is in the rabble-rousing business of politics of this country. Probably a more erudite and more diplomatic leader, a more interesting man to lead the delegation was the great senator from Garissa, Mzee Haji, who's very experienced, who's very erudite, and who's very well respected. Probably should be the man who should have spoken at that thing. And I just want to say that it is very, very important for us to know, as all the other people here will confirm, that Jubaland is very important to our government. Very important. Because, Olive, we've suffered here in Isli, in downtown, in Garissa. Our soldiers just had an IED there in Harhar. So Kenya is not going to play a Shakespeare's play anywhere here. It's going to play a guts and balls game over the issue of Jubaland, because these terrorists are going to want to cross over there and come over to our place. But I also remember speaking to and I remember hearing Mr. Midamba speak about this. There's the other side of the coin, the responsibility of that state, it's now about 2 to 3 years, to take responsibility for security in Jubaland. And also, if we just see Jubaland as a long-term answer to a security problem, we would have failed in our analysis of the political economy of Somalia. We need to deal with the central government. We need the central government to be the primus inter pares in Latin, to be the institution that actually takes responsibility of security over all of Somalia, has its police force, its intelligence, its army, and that is the surefire way in which we Kenyans are going to be safe from terrorism from Somalia. Last point. I also believe that Kenya should not be partisan. Kenya should not get engaged in the mud politics of clanism in Somalia. It's not our business to take sides with clans in Somalia. Do you know what happened to the Americans when they tried to do that in Mogadishu? It was a disaster. We cannot be seen to be allied to a clan government in Somalia. We have to be allied with security, constitutional government, democratic government, rule of law, and security all over Somalia, because that's our national security. Our national security is not a clan. No. And it's very important that the central government doesn't feel that Kenya is buddy-buddy too much with Mr. Mudobe in Kismayo. Otherwise, this diplomatic wrangles, and you know that it's not a wrangle now, it has become the words of the great CLR James, confusion was confounded. And it's important that we settle this issue, as my learned colleague will tell you in 1 second.
All right, so we're not doing very well in terms of time. So I'm going to just give you the opportunity to all make your final comments. Professor?
It is important for Kenya government to develop what I will call situation table. It can be in the foreign service area, it can be in the president office. Somalia is very important for Kenya. It's important for our coexistence between the two countries. It is important for our peaceful resolution, and it can disrupt our development trend. So I agree with my friend Hasi that we cannot afford as a country to be mixed up with the clan warfare. We cannot afford to have a division between the national government and a provincial government in Somalia. We need to trade very carefully. We need to send the delegates which understand the shared interest of the country, that will speak on behalf of the country with credibility and with information. And so the president needs to use the right people to speak on our behalf. And every statement coming out of Somalia need to be carefully evaluated and crafted, and the response need to be as careful as possible so that we can have consistent.
All right. Dr. Mustafa, then I'll come this way.
Yeah, Olive, Somalia is now that place which some of the proxy wars or conflicts out in the Gulf are played in our next door neighbor. And this will eventually have an impact on AMISOM and on Kenya's security. It's very important that this country, this government, comes up with a long-term strategy on how to deal with these issues. Of course, short, medium term, but the long-term outlook of things. And that, in terms of what Kenya should really wish for and work towards, that is a stable overall federal Somalia government and a country.
Okay. Dr. Kanenje.
The fact that many Kenyans cannot even take home 25,000 shillings a month, and based on the latest story that MCAs are taking home 25,000 shillings a day is extremely obnoxious, is embarrassing. And I'm extremely ashamed that these MPs live in the same country that we do. I think we should shame them. But the trouble is the way we've monetized our politics, the reason we're getting political thugs into office, and in 2022, I think we should rethink that strategy.
Wow. Dr. Nza?
Yeah, thank you, Olive. Kenya is not blind to the fact that we need to look at the bigger picture in the context of Somalia and our immediate neighborhood. And therefore, one thing we need to tell our people is that they need to be careful about Al-Shabaab propaganda. Al-Shabaab is trying to get in the middle, and they're sending. I met some Somali students, some youths, and they were telling me, look, what is this? And I said, no, this is propaganda by Al-Shabaab. It is part of the whole thing. Dawla al-Islamiyya, fi Iraq wa al-Sham is Daesh, and it is also an extension of Al-Qaeda. So that kind of thing, they want Africa to be divided. They want Somalia to be divided. They want Kenya to be divided, so they can make an entry, and we cannot allow that. And therefore, that is what our people should be careful when they see some of these propaganda. So it's very important that we knit together. Our ambassador to Mogadishu is Major General Lucas Tumbo. And he's been there in the middle of all those bombs. Why? Because we want peace in Somalia. We should not let our people divide these terrorists to divide us.
My colleagues have spoken about very big things, and they're entitled to that, and I'm very impressed, and we all know that all Kenyans are also impressed with this panel because we try to give our positions in a very clear manner. I'd like to bring to the attention of the country a family in Nakuru that is living in extreme poverty and have one or two autistic children. And autism, as you know, is a very difficult disease, difficult condition, and it's extremely difficult for that family in Nakuru. And I was deeply touched by their story. I'm a member of the autism campaign in this country. And I really like to tell not the government, but the corporate world to really come put their heads together and look at this disease and see how they can help struggling parents in Kenya who have children who have autism. It is a very difficult thing, and they're the bottom of the pile in our country, and we really ought to do something about that.
All right. Professor.
Many of our Kenyan citizens have written and speak out about the President Uhuru's legacy. President Uhuru's legacy must not be based on the 4 pillars. The 4 pillars are the long term, just like Vision 2020. President Uhuru's legacy must be based on only 2 pillars. 1, make a dent on corruption in Kenya, and 2, bring Kenyans together. Then the rest will work out.